Our KWTX weather team has been hard at work creating Degrees of Science, a series of one-on-one conversations that dive into the exciting, insightful, informative, and entertaining world of weather, science, climate, and STEM education and how it affects you. I had the pleasure of sitting down with Joey Picca, a meteorologist that served as a consultant for the series America the Beautiful, streaming on Disney+. He talks about his experience leading a plane into storms that produce tornadoes and how weather plays an important role in the project. Here's a peek into our conversation. Well, on that note, yes. I would like to introduce you. And talk a little bit about what you do. So everybody, this is Joey Picca. And Joey, you have had just extensive opportunities that have come your way and have opened the door for some amazing meteorological opportunities. And so I wanted you to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about what you've been doing lately.
Sure. Thanks so much, first off, for having me, Camille.
Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's great to talk and to help me crystallize my thoughts about all the things I have been doing, because sometimes it's, somebody will ask, and then for a second I have to take this time and stumble over my words. And so this actually is good practice for me to talk about what I've been doing. But my career in meteorology has led me to a bunch of different places and different jobs and working with different folks. So more recently, over the last 2 years, I've been working with a cooperative institute in meteorological research out of the University of Oklahoma, where I get to work with folks that I previously worked with at the Storm Prediction Center, which issues the severe weather outlooks all across the country that folks like you use and present on TV and then explain to the viewers what they mean. So we work with them to help develop better products, meteorological tools, better web visualizations, all sorts of things, basically anything you can think of to help deliver weather information, severe weather information better. So I've been doing that for the last 2 years, and then also working with a company called VSpeed for aerial cinematography for weather, forecasting the weather for that aerial cinematography to produce things such as America the Beautiful. Yeah,
so that's actually why we kind of got connected, was your involvement with America the Beautiful through VSpeed, and kind of what led you how did you get into that project?
Sure. So again, around the same time that I actually started working as a research associate with CIRO, with that cooperative institute, a former supervisor of mine, who also happens to be at the Storm Prediction Center. So I guess all paths lead to the Storm Prediction Center, at least for me, apparently. He reached out to me in May 2020. He called me up. And at the time, I actually thought it involved the CIRO position, because I was just starting that, and I was helping them tangentially as the research associate. But instead, as I started to speak with him, he said, well, there's this camera team, this film team that has a fighter jet, and he wasn't even entirely sure if he remembered correctly or what exactly it was, but they reached out to us, and they're looking for a meteorologist to help them guide a plane around thunderstorms, which already sort of piqued my interest, because it's not every day, Camille, that somebody comes along and says, like, hey, I have this plane, I want to go fly around thunderstorms. Can you help me with that?
Right, because usually it's the opposite. You're on a flight and they divert around the thunderstorm.
Exactly. We have a behind the scenes for the work that VSpeed did for the show, where our director of photography straight up says, this is stuff that pilots are specifically trained to avoid. But we're doing the opposite, which is we want to go towards it in a safe manner. So they wanted somebody to really help with the specifics of guiding a plane in a safe fashion around storms, potentially tornadoes, to get this aerial footage to be used in, at the time, what I was told was just a show maybe for National Geographic or Disney+. So my former supervisor asked me, hey, are you interested in this? I'll give them your contact information. Am I interested in it? Of course I'm interested in it. So he then sends my contact information to them. I speak with them a couple days later, and just a few days after that, I'm on a flight to Rapid City, South Dakota, to help them guide this little fighter jet around storms.
So South Dakota is where you guys went up in the air first?
That is where, for storm chasing, the main pilot, the film pilot, John Flanagan, and Greg Wilson, who was the main person on camera, and the photography director, they went up together in this smaller jet, which is an L-39. It basically is a little tiny fighter trainer jet, believe it or not, that they had to use. and it had underneath the nose this massive camera system, basically this amazing camera system to take this incredible footage. So I stayed on the ground there with Mike Knockenhauer, who was the executive producer and the head of the company. So we would work together with the forecasting and then say, okay, it looks like we're going to have storms over here. Go in that direction, fly over there. We went through some training, but that was how we did it at first, actually. It was just the two of them in this jet, and then we shipped them out and then hoped they found what they needed to find.
But you got to go up too,
Correct.
right, in a plane and see the thunderstorm activity kind of just forming
Absolutely.
naturally.
Yeah, and that was definitely the highlight for me of this whole experience, because I mean, even if it had just been providing that guidance on the ground, sitting in a big hangar at the Rapid City Airport and telling this jet to go fly off, that would be an experience of a lifetime. That was already cool enough for me.
Yeah.
But we realized pretty quickly, you know, and it's obviously nothing against the pilot or Greg, who was operating the camera, but when you get into the nitty-gritty, as meteorologists, we know that, you know, things are changing very rapidly. These are very dynamic situations. And if you're trying to capture something as small scale as a tornado, and you're just sending two folks out to sort of fly around storms and hoping that, you know, 30, 45 minutes, 1 hour ahead of time, you're going to get them on the right storm with a tornado, your probability of pulling this off becomes extremely small. So we quickly realized that for the next season, what we would do was we would get Mike and the heads of the team, who are much better at actually making business things happen, and they know many more folks in the aviation world, would actually get a small business jet, which was this larger jet that you see a lot of in the behind the scenes, where we could all get in there, kind of like a command station in the sky. So two pilots, Mike, Greg, myself, a tech, our behind the scenes individual who got a lot of that great footage of us working. And then one other person on camera. So I can't do math that quickly in my head. I think maybe I named 8 people. And that was when we were all in there together, and we did storm chasing on a couple different deployments, one in West Texas and one in sort of the northern plains / northern Rockies. And that was in June 2021, so last year. And so those are the 2 times we were out together.
So do you feel like being in the bigger plane limited your potential to get close to the thunderstorm? Like the smaller plane was able to do more, or do you think they were just equal in the sense of getting close?
I think, you know, the smaller one, the Albatross is what it's called, L39, which is the actual name, not just a nickname. It's actually pretty nimble, supposedly. So Albatross is a fascinating name that it has. Is more maneuverable, but honestly, the larger jet, the capabilities, the time it can stay in the air, the fuel it can carry is much more extended over the smaller jet. So for the distances we were trying to get to the storm, we didn't want to get that close. Obviously, we had safety concerns. We want to make sure we got home safely. It could pull off most of what the smaller trainer jet could pull off, yet it had the capability to stay in the air twice as long, you know, 4 hours versus 2 hours.
Sure, so you kind of have to give and take to get the shots that you want and need to see to help the research and help the project as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you actually did get to see thunderstorms that created tornadoes?
Yes, yeah, that was, at the end of the day, that was one of the main goals of our deployments out to get these storms, because the feedback or the shot lists that we had from WildStar, which was the company that was working with Nat Geo and Disney Plus. I know we kind of have to go down the list here, but we were working with WildStar, which the founders of that company are folks that have produced things like Planet Earth and, you know, these landmark natural history shows. So they had set up V-Speed to do the aerial cinematography for America the Beautiful. And so they had this shot list that they wanted basically from us to be able to work it into the various stories that they wanted to tell as they were producing the series for Nat Geo. So it wasn't all about tornadoes. You know, they wanted just a lot of interesting shots with storms developing, different reveals of storms, things to help them really show the majesty, if you will, the magnitude, the scale of these storms. But you could tell from the feedback, and again from the shot list, tornadoes were kind of the final nugget that they really wanted from us. They wanted specific reveals, shots where maybe we're flying low to the ground, the camera's looking down, and then you're looking at the prairie, and then you tilt up and you see the tornado, this big reveal to sort of show the menace that it is, to the various natural wildlife, which is the main part of the story.
Yeah, because you got to work on the weather side of things, but the project as a whole is not just weather.
No.
And so people who want to find this project, it's more about how weather interacts with wildlife, right?
Yes, absolutely. The main theme of the story is actually about the wildlife across North America and the diverse landscapes and the diverse climates and ecosystems they have to live in and thrive in, because the theme kind of becomes, and you'll hear it used a lot in the show, which is all these little and large animals are heroes in various ways because they learn to thrive in these extreme climates and these extreme landscapes and the different terrain. And so the weather ties in with that, because obviously the weather is pretty extreme across North America too, and so it's how they handle various weather across North America. And so across the prairie, when you're dealing with the prairie dogs and the burrowing owls, which are really cool. I loved actually that part of the show, watching it myself on my couch. It's just, random Joe just watching on his couch the show, and seeing how they present these different animals, and then they show the storms forming and the tornado forming, and how the prairie dog has to go down into his hole, or the burrowing owl uses the prairie dog hole to get out of the bad weather.
Yeah, because you think about the bad weather and the impacts that it has on our lives, but sometimes the wildlife is like a demographic even that gets left behind.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you really don't. It's one of the cool parts about the show is it shows you, just the ways that some of the various wildlife and various animals out there have learned to deal with such extreme weather. I mean, the tornadoes obviously are a big part of it, but one of the most fascinating parts about the series that I thought that I had no idea about was in Death Valley, where there are these ants, these honeypot ants, they're called, that basically can go forever without, or not forever literally, but for a long time without water. They live in Death Valley, and just how they exist underground, it's beyond fascinating. So yeah, it really is eye-opening in terms of how these various demographics live amongst the weather and these landscapes and weather.
And that is so cool to be part of a project that's not just specifically weather, because it all ties together in some form or fashion. So that's very cool to be a part of.
Absolutely.
I do have a question for you.
Okay.
So what were the emotions as you kind of got pulled onto this project, and knowing that, okay, I'm kind of one of the sole people responsible for flying these planes around these thunderstorms. That's a lot of money and equipment. That's a lot of, safety concerns. Yeah, what was that experience like for you?
It was intense at times. I'm not going to lie to you. Early on, so this was in 2020 when I first started forecasting for them, when I was just on the ground.
Okay.
And this was going out to Rapid City, going out to St. George, Utah, lots of places in the West, these small little airports and towns. And that was a pressure of a certain magnitude, I would say. But we were just looking for storms, pretty shots. We weren't getting to sort of hitting up against deadlines where, okay, we really need this shot, we really need this tornado. So there was a pressure there, and certainly making the call, okay, we're going to deploy to this town is going to be our base, and we're going to do this for 4 or 5 days. And you start to slowly build up the pressure as we get through the months, and we know this sort of the end of when we need to be shooting for this. And okay, this is the last severe storm season we're going to be shooting, so basically we need to get the shots that they want. It's not like the show wouldn't have happened, but they wouldn't have been able to tell the story how they wanted to tell it. So as we progressed through 2020 into early 2021, and then especially as not just I was on site, but I was in the plane itself, and now there's really no excuse. It's like, let's go find a tornado. And 1, 2, 3 weeks out, we're having to start the planning for this. And again, as meteorologists, we know to predict a tornado at those time ranges, you just can't do. You can't do that.
It's imperfect science.
Exactly.
Yeah.
you have to start to hone in on it, where you say, okay, the pattern is looking more favorable during maybe this week for the types of storms that might produce something that we want to see, produce a picturesque tornado or something like that. So to get the gears turning that far in advance and slowly getting into, let's say, 7 to 10 days and saying, okay, I think, we're going to go to Garden City, Kansas. And Mike, again, who is the head of everything with V-Speed, and he is like, so Garden City, and I say, yep, Garden City on this day. And knowing that it's my word that is moving the plane from Southern California, that is moving people from around the country to get there, and then we're there, and then, the storms are happening, and we have to get on, the right storm and be in the right spot, and the data is coming through at times on my phone a little spotty. There were a whole host of things that, yes, the pressure, I could feel it. I know right before I left Dallas to go up to Garden City for our first deployment, to be in the plane for storms, folks could probably tell you. Anybody who talked to me is like, hey, you seem to be a little on edge right now, because I just, safety wasn't a big part of the pressure, because I knew, we knew what we were doing. I was with guys that weren't wild or extreme about it. We want to be safe. We want to get the shots in a proper fashion. So that wasn't really a contributor to the pressure. It was just, I didn't want to let them down. I knew there was a lot of riding on it, and they were basically going off my word. And so you start to hear the demons in your head that are like, oh, you can't forecast this, right? So yeah, there was a lot of pressure. Imposter syndrome. We all deal with it in some way, shape, or fashion. And I certainly was. So, when we got that first tornado, it was just, I felt like the weight of the world had just lifted off my shoulders.
Well, I think that you got the shots that you guys needed, so that just speaks to your capability, and so I just want to...
Small luck.
Yeah, no. Yeah. That your forecasting skills and just your intuition, I think, for those storms, it all came together because of you. So
Thank you.
I just want to make sure you hear that from me.
Thank you. It helps to hear that from other meteorologists. Yeah.
Well, do you have a favorite memory from this project or this time?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say there aren't, and again, this will probably, after we get done talking here, I'll be like, oh, I should have mentioned that. But I would say it's sort of in aggregate that just the neatest aspect about the project and going out on the road with everybody. And most of the time they were able to get the shots with me forecasting remotely, so I just forecast out of Dallas. But when I got to go out, which is a few times a year, and especially for storms where they wanted me on site or in the plane, you just got to see so many parts of the country that you would never otherwise see. Again, I'm born and raised in Dallas, and then I worked in New York for the Weather Service, so I'm kind of a big city person. And we get to go to, again, Rapid City or St. George or Garden City, all these places that it's just, you get to see, parts of the country and folks that you would never otherwise see. That, you roll into town and you land at the airport. And actually here, this does remind me, as I've worked my brain, we were sitting that first evening, Mike and I, in a bar in Garden City, Kansas. And so everybody else, I think, was already at the hotel, because Mike and I got in late to the airport, which is the tiniest little airport.
Wait, and Garden City is where you saw the storm for the tornado?
So we were based out of Garden City for that, but we saw it in West Texas. So that day we had actually flown down to Lubbock and then flew out of Lubbock.
Sorry, I was trying to connect the dots there.
Yeah. So suddenly when you're in a plane, the world expands and how far you can go.
Yeah.
But that first night we went to we're in late, it's 11 o'clock or whatever, and so we want to start forecasting, also develop a few graphics to show the pilots, the camera folks, okay, this is what we're expecting, this is how it's going to work. So we find the only place open, again, which is this bar in Garden City, Kansas, and we sit there, and you can see it's where Garden City goes to enjoy its night out, and it's kind of away from all the action. And we're probably the first people ever to open up like a MacBook in there and start talking about the weather to each other. We're sitting there and we're pointing at things, just talking, enjoying a beer or whatever. And somebody comes over and he's just like, what are you guys doing? And we start to tell him, like, well, we're here with a plane. We're trying to shoot footage for a series on Nat Geo. And he's like, you mean to tell me you're flying this airplane straight at tornadoes? And we're like, something like that. And then he had some more colorful language, and he was very amazed at that. So that's one of the better stories that I have out of the trip.
I can only imagine the colorful language you've kind of heard around what you're doing.
But again, stuff like that was just such a neat memory to be able to go out and do that and do something so unique.
And what exciting time. I mean, this project is coming out, or came out in 2022. You said you you shot in 2021 and 2020. That is a quick turnaround. I mean, you know, production projects take, you know, years and years, and that is years, but that seems like a quick turnaround to get it all together from what you guys shot and everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's impressive to me just how all of these disparate parts come together to make this show, because, you know, I just think about my role as a meteorologist for one company getting footage for the series, and I feel like I was driving myself into the ground repeatedly, and my hair was on fire half the time just for this tiny part of this one company, of which there were many other folks getting amazing footage, again, of the wildlife, of the situations they're in, and just amazing shots where, you know, a mama bear is carrying her baby cub across these alligator-infested waters and holding the baby up to make sure that the gators don't get him, you know, and so it blows my mind to think somebody was hanging out in the swamp for like 2 weeks just waiting for this perfect shot. But this was going on for the last 2 years and plus, really 3 years, honestly, because I think some of the shooting was going on in 2019.
Okay.
V-Speed just started its work in 2020. And this is all going on, and then this is all getting whittled down and edited and produced and processed into the show. And then there's the score on top of it that they're producing to you know, or composing to really fit the shots and the scenes, which I think they did a really great job with that too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is mind-blowing to me when you think about what goes into it. And so another cool aspect for me, to sort of touch upon the question from before, is just, it's amazing to realize, you know, to get to see a little bit more firsthand just what goes on into, you know, natural history shows like this. It's the amount of work is stunning. Stunning.
Yes. And it takes a village, right?
It takes a village, a city, a country, yeah, whatever.
So this project that you do is kind of just, we talked a little bit at the beginning, one of the things that you do, it's not like your everyday kind of day-to-day job situation. What does that kind of look like for you? So amazingly, this has just been a little bit of a side hustle and a side gig, and pretty cool, and I'm not gonna lie. I try to remind myself most days how lucky I am that I've been able to do this and continue to work with V-Speed. But yeah, my main focus, my main job, my day-to-day is working full-time as a research associate for a cooperative institute in meteorological studies called CIRO, which is out of the University of Oklahoma. I work remotely out of Dallas because I've kind of found my place there in Dallas. But from my time prior at the Storm Prediction Center, which is also in Norman at the National Weather Center, where all of these meteorological agencies and entities are housed, the folks at CIRO work with folks in the different agencies, so the Storm Prediction Center or the National Severe Storms Lab or the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Norman, or other groups, to help be researchers for them, developers for them, essentially, where, hey, they have a forecast problem, or they would like to see information presented differently, they would like to get new guidance to help them forecast better. The folks at CIRO, and myself included, will work with them to try and help deliver things like that, deliver products like that, to help them do their job better, to help all of us do our job better, and sort of, that's the nice story we say. But honestly, I mean, it's a huge group of folks in Norman and remotely, you know, spread around the country that do really amazing work every day to help develop severe weather information better. Well, that's awesome. And so, you know, you've been a meteorologist for a long time, and I don't mean
gray hair is starting to show up, man.
No, mine too, actually, yeah. But no, I want to ask, because I know that people who typically go into meteorology or science-related fields sometimes have an event or an experience in their life that kind of draws them to that. Do you have something like that for yourself?
You know, it's fascinating. So I think on the one hand, I am like most meteorologists in that regard. It started from a young age. I feel like we all kind of, the bug bit us pretty early, somewhere, you know, usually elementary school or even prior. It's a pretty common tale for meteorologists, and I was no different. I want to say I was maybe 6, 7 years old, and I just started to be fascinated by the weather. And the Weather Channel was still somewhat of a novelty, I guess, at this point. It'd been out for a little while. This would have been the early 90s. And I loved just like watching the scroll on the Weather Channel. I would read it. My parents thought that was the oddest thing, but they tell me that today still. But yeah, I enjoyed that thoroughly. And growing up in Dallas, we had it's no different than Waco, really. The climate's pretty similar. Lots of severe storms, lots of severe weather. So that would always fascinate me as a kid when it would come rolling by. I did get actually, which is amazing to look back at my life, I was deathly afraid of tornadoes as a small child.
Me too.
Yeah, so maybe there's something where we want to attack that fear. I don't know. And now, yeah, somebody told 7-year-old me, you're going to be flying at a tornado one day. That would be fascinating. But yeah, I remember if the Weather Service office would issue a tornado warning, the whole screen on the Weather Channel would go red, and then you get the alert tone, and just, oh my gosh, as a kid, it was like, just you think the tornado's on your front doorstep ready to get you. But I think in a way that also provided a route to want to learn more about it. And so, I just slowly wanted to find any possible outlet for information. I watched the local news on it. And my mom, I remember a couple summers, she took me on to visit KXAS, the NBC affiliate up there in DFW, and go visit the meteorologist there and talk to them. And I went on tour of the Weather Service office in Fort Worth too. And then I found myself working there many, many years later for a little while. And so there was that, and then moments. The 2000 downtown Fort Worth tornado, I remember, was a big moment. I was in high school at the time. I was flipping back and forth between the Dallas Stars game on TV as a huge Stars fan, and then the tornado, because it's not every day a tornado is going through a downtown area, and just being, of course, frightened by that scene at the time, but watching, it was David Finfrock there who was presenting the information about, this scene of a tornado going through downtown Fort Worth. So that sticks in my mind. And so I think it was just little by little, these different events that built the interest. And so
that same tornado is what got me into weather.
No kidding. Wow.
So,
wow.
yeah,
Holy cow.
as a kid, we lived in Fort Worth as well.
Oh,
and so we were down by the Fort Worth Zoo.
Oh, my goodness.
And so the sky was green on our side of the system. And as a kid, you look up at the sky and you're like, okay, the sky is green. It feels really nasty. There's a tornado on the TV.
Wow.
I'm afraid. So that actually got me, that was the event that got me interested.
No kidding.
And I said, I want to know how this forms, who I love is in the path of this forming, and where it's going, and just like, I want to know more about this crazy phenomenon that doesn't happen every day. So that's kind of a crazy tie that we have together.
Yeah. I would imagine there probably, for any meteorologists that were growing up around that time in DFW, imagine a few of them have a tie back to that event, in 2000.
Because like you said, it's not every day goes downtown. It was a big deal. Everybody turned their focus to that. So
it was. I remember on Channel 5 at the time. I think, because obviously our ability to see things, and not everybody has, obviously at that time a camera on their phone ready to go. We just didn't have the eyes quite everywhere that we do now. And so I think, they knew there was a tornado, but then I remember watching on the news, they switched to the tower cam out of Fort Worth, and it's just the debris flying around.
Yes, I remember that same scene.
Yeah. And I remember Finfrock was he did a wonderful job in presenting the information and sort of keeping his demeanor, because I could imagine the moment it would be very easy for somebody who is less even keeled to just sort of lose their mind that's going on. But I remember even him, somebody who was so experienced, was sort of taken back for just a moment of just how incredible in one way, somewhat horrifying in another way, the scene suddenly was. So, yeah, it's definitely a seminal moment, I guess, for DFW-based meteorologists.
Yes. And so, and then you went to OU, and that's kind of where you got your meteorology degree. And so, did you do storm chasing up there or anything?
A little bit. You'd be surprised. I was not a huge storm chaser. When I was in, actually, this was after grad school when I came back, so I'm jumping ahead here, but this is probably the best story I have in this regard. After I got my first job out of grad school at OU with the Weather Service in New York, I came back to Norman to work with the Storm Prediction Center, and another friend of mine from undergrad at OU who had gone off to get his PhD out west in fire weather, and then had come back, was also working at the SPC, actually at CIRO for the SPC. And we used to go on occasional chases together during that time when we were there, but we would always call them gentlemen's chases, which was basically if there were storms within like a 1 county radius of Norman, we were willing to go check them out, but otherwise we were like, we can get other work done, or we can just go enjoy an evening at a patio somewhere.
That's crazy that you don't really you didn't have that in college, and then you went straight to let's go fly through a tornado.
Yeah. And I certainly went on a couple chases. I mean, you can't go to school in Oklahoma as a meteorologist and not go on storm chases. I mean, it seems like, it's just, you're going to be around it. And so, we went out, I would say as an undergrad and then in grad school, maybe 4 or 5 times, but it was never, I see what some folks do today, or even what some of my fellow students were doing at the time. They're just driving for days and days and hours, and then they just see some cumulus clouds, and that's it. And it's more credit to them, honestly, because they have just the fortitude to just go they want to see the impressive scale of these events so much in person. I loved seeing it. It was fascinating to me, but I figured, I was like, in Norman we get huge supercells come by all the time. I just go look outside and there goes one. So that was kind of my thinking. But it was fun. It was more like a little road trip with friends when I go out. That was kind of how I viewed storm chasing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, this project is so cool because people who maybe don't want to go storm chasing but want to know what it looks like, they get to see that through what you guys
did the work for them.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Well, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
So what's next for Joey Picca?
That's a big question. I asked that many days. So for the time being, it's really continuing the work that I have been doing for CIRO, continuing to develop new products, new visualizations for them, because I really enjoy the folks that I work with up there in Norman. It's just such a wonderfully talented team, and so motivated in wanting to just further the science in meteorology. With V-Speed, I'm still working with them. I actually just talked with Mike a few days ago. Things have calmed down a good sense in the bit that we're not flying for America the Beautiful, because that's obviously out, but it's just breaking news there. But there are other projects that they're starting to get signed on to. Nothing, I believe, right now that is for a TV series, but lots of various projects with aerospace companies to try and do aerial cinematography for them, or footage for them, that they're working on getting signed or locked down right now. And so I'm basically still their consultant meteorologist, ready to go. And we've talked about wanting to grow out the weather consulting a little bit more for them, especially on the film side of things, because that was something 2 years ago when I started with V-Speed, the first forecasts I remember giving them were very much sort of like National Weather Service forecaster, where I was like used to one way of presenting the information. And then, I learned pretty quickly, I was like, okay, they need different information. I think that's something we all learn as meteorologists, is really how to tailor what you're presenting. And you learn pretty quickly they're film folks, so they want to know things that are important for film, light being number one. And so I really learned quickly, and I'm still trying to get the hang of it 2 years later, how to best forecast for light conditions, what different layers of cloud cover can do to the light and the time of day, and really trying to have that awareness of, well, the weather's good in this one area, but a storm could pop up all the way 100 miles away. And if it's right where the sun's setting, like that, the light is gone.
Yeah. That's not something you have to think about when you're talking about impacts necessarily. For people and property, but for film, definitely.
Absolutely. And so I would love to explore it. I don't know if it's feasible, but forecasting for film or for work like that, and I think one route would be through V-Speed. So something that just the gears slowly turn in my mind. But honestly, right now it's sort of just the status quo, because I really am enjoying working with the folks I'm working with.
Well, that's so awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we're going to see many more great things, projects-wise and just information-wise, and making it, I know you guys have a passion, especially you have a passion for weather information and making that accessible for people, and how it impacts them even more so than just the information. So that's amazing what you're doing. So I appreciate that so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, and I want to just let everybody know that you can catch what Joey and his team did on America the Beautiful. It's now streaming on Disney+.